see, but thank you for coming and welcome. And please welcome Brandon Lavelle. Okay, who is the teacher at the Motor School in Kansas. And if you want to know more, there's a lot in the little notebook there with really nice pictures of boats and hats.
Okay, good morning. Again, I'm Brandon Lavelle. I'm the senior instructor at the National Motor Lifeboat School. So I've been there now for probably about 2 years. Yeah, just over 2 years now. But just a little bit about me, my background. I grew up in Oregon, so if you guys are familiar with La Pine, the Bend area, and then when I was in high school, I moved out to Brookings, the southern Oregon coast. And so pretty much ever since I was in grade school, we would go out to Depot Bay, and I would see, the lifeboats, the old 44s, going through the hole there. So I thought, that was a pretty cool looking job. So I asked my parents what they were, and she said, well, it's the Coast Guard, it's like the ocean police. So pretty much at a young age, I decided, well, I'm going to join the ocean police, because I want to do what they're doing. So high school, I ended up taking up surfing, bodyboarding, all that kind of stuff, and of course, I get more exposure to see what the Coast Guard was doing up there, so pretty much just solidified what I'm doing right now. So back in 1999, I graduated high school, and then I joined up, and I went out to boot camp in Cape May, New Jersey, spent 2 months out there. Prior to doing what I'm doing now, I went to Kodiak. I spent 2 years up there. I was on a buoy tender, and it's pretty much all over, probably from southeast Alaska all the way out to Dutch Harbor. We would service a lot of the navigational aids, buoys. So I had a really good time out there. I got to fly around in the Coast Guard helos. They'd drop me off on little islands, and I'd spend, probably like 5 hours out there at a time, just kind of kicking back, watching my ship out there on the horizon, doing a bunch of work while I was eating sandwiches. So. It was a good time. I really liked it. I had to really make a decision though, because I really enjoyed that work so much. But I joined the Coast Guard to be a surfman anyway, so I decided to go with my original intent. And so my next stop for me was stationed Quileute River in La Push, Washington. So anybody been up there? Kind of like the end of the road, a little bit more than the road than here. So I spent 4 years there. I managed to certify as a surfman on the 47s that we have, what you guys see running in and out of the bar up here at Cape D. So after that, I went back to Brookings, spent the next 6 years there, and after that I went to Tillamook Bay, spent 4 years there. And at the end of my tour there is when I got a phone call asking if I would be interested in an instructor position at the lifeboat school. So I interviewed for the job. Apparently they liked me well enough. So now here I am. Been here for the last 2 years. It's been a good time. So I have about 18 years in, and the next couple of years I'm going to retire and just be a stay-at-home dad. So I'm looking forward to it. But a little bit about the history of the Motor Lifeboat School. So it was established back in 1968, and its original intent was to be established as a regional training center. So for everybody that was stationed across these heavy weather units in Oregon and Washington, that's where they sent them. So it was a very specialized, very direct means of providing training and giving these guys exposure to the elements that are always out here. Prior to that, excuse me, one of the places that was considered to be a possible site to build the school was Station Umpqua, or the Umpqua River. Is anybody familiar with that area? So Reedsport, Sayuswa, heard you mention that. So they kind of have the same kind of training grounds as we do, only ours is just a much larger scale, and we have the ability to pick and choose, and a lot more training opportunity up here. In 1980, the Motor Lifeboat School was actually established. So what you see here today, what you go out there, that is what branched from 1980. That's when we began hosting students from all across the nation. 1990, the first 47-foot motor lifeboat, the 47200, That was delivered, and basically they prototyped that boat for a couple of years at the Motor Lifeboat School. So that meant they put it through the riggers, they would intentionally get it knocked over and drive it really fast and probably do a lot of things that you shouldn't do just to see how well it would survive. In 1997, the first production boat of what you see today, the 47s, that was actually delivered, and it was the 47206, which is there today, one of our boats that we train on all the time. So. Currently, we have 4 different types of classes. We have a basic course, so that's your novice students, and we basically take them in anything up to 8 feet with some relatively calm winds. Then your next step up there is the heavy weather course. So now that's your journeyman course, and we're introducing them to, of course, larger elements. So anything in up to seas about 30 feet, whatever the boat can handle, 20 feet. And we take them out there, we take them out to some large winds. So last winter, we had seas from probably in excess of 20 feet, and it was gusting 70 knots. And so we get a lot of students that come out from the East Coast, and really the only times you see that kind of thing is during a hurricane. And so for them to actually be out there standing in it and dealing with it is it's an eye-opener for them. So, even me as well, depending on what's going on. So. And then you have our master course, which is the surfman course. So that course runs about 4 weeks, and we pretty much just specialize in operating the boat in surf conditions up to 20 feet. So that's the maximum surf that the boat can handle. And students attending these courses, they come from units that have the 47. So we're not going to get students that don't have this kind of boat type at their unit. It's a very specialized course, but we do take the Mexican Navy. So that's what class is going on right now. We have a total of 4 students attending that class. It's our international course. We put that on once a year, and it's pretty fun actually. So try to give them the cultural experience of the area and just teach them how to run this boat. Some of them have the boat and others don't. So we have like a very broad audience for that course, but it's fun. We have a translator on board, and yeah, it gets interesting. It's fun though. So over the course of the year, we have about 120 students that come through. For our basic course, we have about 60. For our heavy weather courses, we usually have about 48 students, and that also includes Canadian students as well. I forgot to mention them earlier because they have the same kind of boat as we do, just a different propulsion plan. For the surfman course, we typically only host about 9 students for that course, except for this year we've kind of altered our schedule a little bit, so we're going to put on another surf course, and we're going to have about 18 students total for that. We average about 40 hours of underway time per class. So to put that in perspective, we're only required to get 40 hours of underway time for a currency cycle to maintain our certifications. And they can normally get that within 2 to 4 weeks when they come here. So for those of us that are stationed here, we usually have an upwards of 500 hours or more per year running the bar and everything. So. We have about 84% of the students that come to the course, they actually go back home and they certify there. So the numbers keep climbing as well every year. So sending the students here they're not going to get that kind of training typically back home, because when they come here, they're not interrupted with their collateral duties. They don't have to clean weapons. They don't have to go out and do boardings. They don't have to make sure that the grass gets mowed back home at their units. So they come here and they just drive the boats. So, is there any questions in regards to the Motor Lifeboat School? Yes?
How many schools are there like this?
1. Only 1 in the entire world.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have the Canadians, we have the Mexican Navy. We almost had a Jamaican student for this class, so that would have been kind of cool, but he just dropped out. I don't know. Yes?
Do you run like the surfing course mostly in the winter time, or is it, obviously the
It's
summer?
all, yeah, everything that we do, it's entirely weather dependent. So the surfing course, it's 4 weeks long, and that's just to accommodate the days where maybe it's too big, or it's too small, so we have to have like an extra week just to be sure that we can check all the boxes so we can graduate the students and send them home.
Do we charge Canada and Mexico for this?
Yes, well, actually, they foot the bill for their stay up here.
They do, okay, so
Yeah.
the Mexicans also there when they're up here?
Yes.
Okay.
So typically, for our Coast Guard members, it's our training, or the training quota center. They're the ones that foot the bill to have people come up here. But when it comes from international students, it's their governments, their agencies are the ones footing the bill.
Yeah.
So, anything else?
Is it here because our bar is so rough, or?
Yes. For our operator courses, of course, it's relatively flat, and even if it is too big for them, we have the opportunity to go up the river. So there's areas to find suitable training sources. For heavy weather and everything, yes. So since there's, the river itself is roughly 1,200 miles long, and I can't remember the actual the word I'm looking for, the flow of the river, but it's very high. So you have a lot of current flowing out of this river at any given time, and so even on a calm day, you can find some pretty big stuff depending on the tide. So.
And quartermaster and bosuns are conning the boat.
Yes, so the Coast Guard in general, they did away with the quartermaster rate, and they combined bosun mates and quartermasters together.
Okay.
So typically you'll find your prior quartermasters, those are the guys that stayed with the ships.
Yeah.
They're still bosun mates, but they don't typically want to go out and receive the kind of training that we do here. It's all your shoreside bosun mates for the most part that go the surfman route. So they've had that exposure, so typically you're not gonna, I've never been a prior QM or anything, so. Anything else?
Can you
Yes.
explain that a little bit further, quartermaster and boatswain?
So earlier, before they made that merger, quartermasters, their specialty was navigation. They would handle a lot of like things on the operations side, so planning, logistical things like that. Planning the nav routes for the ships, all that stuff, and then standing watch, making sure, taking plots where the ship was the entire time, assisting the officer of the deck through the navigation process of the ship. That was their specialized training, that was their specialty, so that's where you would find them. Bosun mates were required to do pretty much their job as well, just maybe not such a centralized location within the Coast Guard. So bosun mates, we had like a broader range of responsibilities. You find us doing law enforcement, maintaining weapons, running search and rescue, driving small boats, management positions at your support, whatever it may be. That's our specialty. Is just management. So we're pretty much the jack of all trades. When you join the Coast Guard, you receive your Blue Jackets manual, and it tells right there, the bosun mate is the jack of all trades. So just an example of that, at my last unit, we had our engineering petty officer. So that's a machinery tech. He had a problem with managing people, getting things done. So not to talk bad about the guy, but really, I ended up being the EPO. I'm not a mechanic, but the training I received as far as managing people, that's what helped get me through it until we found a suitable replacement. So we get called upon to do random things like that all the time. It's kind of annoying, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting. So.
Where did those words come from? I mean, what does that mean, bosun and?
Bosun's mate, so basically, a lot of these terminologies, these ratings and everything, they stem from years and years back when the revenue cutter service was established. Now, how they originated, I'm not 100% sure. But that's where the terminology stems from. So. Yes?
On the boats that you train on, are they the ones that can't turn over or something?
They do. They can. The 206 that I was explaining earlier, our oldest boat in the fleet that we have, was my first winter here, and we actually rolled 360 degrees. Oh. Yes. So We did probably about $50,000 worth of damage in about 5 seconds. So, and then we had personal injuries as well. I think I sprained my shoulder. My friend sprained his back. The kid that was driving, I think he had contusions on his ribs. So it happens.
It happens, yeah, okay.
I don't want it to happen. Don't want it to happen again. So.
But it came back upright.
Yes.
It did, okay, that's.
So essentially what happened is we ended up taking the wave, not exactly broadside, but pretty much right on our starboard bow. So if you guys are familiar with that terminology, for those of you who are not, it's basically the bow front of the boat on the right-hand side. So what happened is we saw a wave, so we kind of set an angle to it, we drove up towards it, and directly behind that one, because that first wave that we saw, it was so large, we couldn't see what was behind it. So we came up, and then we saw, oh, there's that next one. And so the intent of the instructor and the student was to turn and follow and drive on the back side of that wave that we just came across, and we were trying to outrun that next one. But we obviously weren't going to make it, so he turned into it as hard as he could. We hit it, and then it hit it with such force that we ended up rolling 360 degrees. And yeah, I lost my helmet. And I was kind of upset because I saw my GoPro on it and my helmet's in the water. Everybody thought there was a person in the water. I said, no, I'm fine, I'm right here. But after that, I took over on my side of the seat, and I ended up backing up through other waves until we had enough water and enough big enough lull in the waves for me to turn the boat around properly and then get out of it.
It's pretty amazing though that they will come back up.
Yes.
I mean, that's.
8 to 12 seconds is the average amount of time. But obviously we're a lot quicker since it's very dynamic, so the force of that wave actually pushed us over a lot quicker than 8 to 12 seconds. And yeah, it was an interesting ride.
That's the only time you've done it? One time?
Yes, one time. There's not a whole lot of them that have done that. A lot of them, every winter you hear about boats getting knocked over about 90 degrees or more. But essentially what happens is if the boat gets knocked over about 70 degrees, the likelihood that it's going to continue to roll in that direction to at least 110 degrees stops. So once it hits 110 degrees, because of the weight in the engine room and everything else, and its other design influences, 110 degrees, and it will pop back up. So typically, you don't have to worry about going all the way under. It's just, it depends on the force of the way that you dealt with and got you in that situation in the first place.
So how much water was in the boat when it came back up?
It was a lot. But that was mainly because when we were backing up, we have the engine room vents, so to provide air to the engine room. So these vents, they're shrouded to try to limit the amount of water that will go in, but still when you're backing up like that into these waves, you end up flooding the engine room. So our bilge alarm was going off, but you couldn't hear the horn because the horn was missing. So all I heard was this hissing sound coming from this air hose. And everyone thought, is that they thought it was an electrical issue, some arcing and sparking. I'm like, no, it's air coming out of there. So, yeah.
So the motors kept going?
They did.
Okay.
Because also with that too, we were over so fast that the engines never lost oil. So we came around that quick. So they never did drop off the line.
How long are they?
Overall, there are 48 feet, 11 inches. So, but without the rub rail system that we have in place, it's 47 feet, 11 inches. But we call them 47s.
You guys are crazy.
I only got 2 more years. I got the t-shirt, I want to do it again.
How many were on the boat at that time?
About 6 of us.
And you all managed to just hang on, or were you?
Yeah, so there's a few of us. See here, you have the driver from the main side, the starboard side. He's seated, he's belted in, and plus everybody on board the boat has a safety harness that you wear around your waist. So you clip in from side to side. So if you're standing and you're not fortunate enough to be seated in a seat with a seat belt, at least you got something.
So you are clipped?
Yeah, I was sitting in the seat and I was buckled up and clipped in. But But yeah, those that weren't seated, they still remained with the boat, but there was basically 3 guys piled on top of each other. My seat basically collapsed, it completely folded. It was bent. I don't remember it, but apparently I was upside down in the chair, and the guy behind me propped me up. And I don't remember that part. So it all happened very fast.
Is there a situation on a real big storm where you guys would not go out? Like I've been hearing on these hurricanes, there are situations where none of the rescues are.
So there's a lot of things that go into that thought process.
Yes.
So one example is when I was at Tillamook, we got a call of a person in the water off of Pacific City. And first off, it was almost sunset. So whoever reported it, he made the call,
Yeah.
said there's a person in the water, and then he left the scene, and then he never answered his phone again. So for us to really confirm that there was actually somebody going in the water, we couldn't. It was kind of it was a very vague report. So we had, the local authorities on scene, and they said, I don't see anybody, but I see a bunch of crab pots not far off the beach. So that's pretty much what we had to go on. At that point in time, normally we would have just launched right away, regardless of what kind of inconsistent information we had. But the conditions were such where they're actually exceeding the limitations of the boat. That combined with nightfall, you have to weigh your options. So does the risk actually, or does the gain outweigh the risk? In that situation, it didn't. So we don't just go right off the bat. You've been raising your hand.
How would you compare these 47 boats with the Triumph?
The 47, obviously, it's a lot quicker, a lot faster. You can get on scene in about half the time that it takes the 52. But the 52 is built like a tank. So our boats, the 47s, they kind of go up and over waves. The 52s, they just go through them. Yeah, so you get really wet. I'm not qualified to drive it, so I don't know all the ins and outs of the thing, but I do know it has more torque. It has larger propellers, a bigger engine, so it has the ability to tow, I believe, I want to say up to 500 tons. Our boats, the 47s, we can only tow up to 150 tons. So you have that as well. Our bolts are aluminum, it's only a 1/4 inch side shell. Those 52s, they're made out of steel. So, yeah, they can take a lot more. They can take up to 30-foot surf. The 47s can only take up to 20-foot surf. The 52s, they can stay out longer. So that's why those 52s are strategically placed in places like Coos Bay, Newport, here, and Grays Harbor. So if you look on a map, they're roughly about 100 miles apart. So if something happens within somebody's area of responsibility that doesn't have a 52, normally within 50 miles, there is somebody that has a 52 that can respond to that. So that's why they're placed where they are today.
I understand that there's only 4 of the 52-footers. Is that
I'm sorry?
correct? There's only 4 of the 52-footers?
Yes, there's only 4 left. So
How many people can you get aboard rescue at one time on the various boats?
I want to say it's 34. Yeah, so you can really pack the thing.
Wow.
Yes.
Other than the driver, are the crews interchangeable, or does the crew have to qualify like on a 47 or a 52?
It depends on what kind of boats that you have at your unit. So let's say in Station K disappointments dynamic, they have a 52, they have a couple 47s, they also have your safe boats, only about 29 feet in length with outboards. So everybody that serves within a boat crew capacity, they are required to at least get boat crew certified. If you're a boatswain, you're required to at least certify at the lowest level. Probably if you're there as a BM2 or higher, the likelihood that they're going to urge you to get surfing qualified if you're not already. Yeah, they're going to be pushing you that direction to get certified as a surfman on all those boats. If you're an engineer, you're going to get certified on all those boats as well. So that's how that works.
How difficult is it to get in the Coast Guard now?
It all depends. It depends on the needs of the service. So if at the time, the numbers are low, it might be pretty difficult to get in. For me, it wasn't difficult at all. Those numbers, I think, were fairly low, so they're taking in a lot of people at that point in time. I was actually called up and they tried to get me to go to boot camp earlier, but I had plane tickets to go to Florida for a couple of weeks. So I want to go party. Yes.
I've heard that your boot camp is one of the toughest.
I've heard that as well. I mean, I can't verify that, but I've heard from multiple sources that if you were to stack them up in ranking order in terms of toughness, it's Marines, Coast Guard, and then some others.
Yeah.
I know that a couple other services, like the Air Force, the Navy, I've heard they have stress cards, so if you're overloaded with stress, you can pull your card out, and I guess people will stop yelling at you. I don't know. I didn't have a stress card. They yelled at me a lot. You had a question first?
You say a stress card?
Yeah. I don't know. That was a rumor. I've read that, and I don't know. I didn't have a card. They just made us do push-ups. So.
If I saw a 20-foot wave, I'd be pulling my stress card.
Yeah, it pretty much just, some people freeze. For those of us that have been in the game for a bit, we manage it all right. Yes?
I have a neighbor who was an instructor in a naval firefighting school, and he had the stress card pulled on him. So,
I just thought that was for boot camp purposes, not anything beyond that.
he thought it was in a volleyball game.
Yes.
The new recruits that you get, do you find, you've been in it 18 years, do you see a difference in the new recruits, or are they all anxious and?
Again, it varies from person to person. I don't want to just generalize, new recruits in the Coast Guard, but I kind of see that, in my opinion, I see that across the board, in all agencies, professions.
Yeah.
People complain about it. It's society. It's I want it and I want it now.
Yeah.
Are you able to get them to stop texting?
I block their phones up in the armory. Yeah, that's what you have to do sometimes. Yes.
Does Coast Guard still have a reserves program?
I'm sorry?
For reserves, do they still take in reserves?
Yes, we still have reservists. So, the ins and outs of that, they serve 2 weeks a month.
2 weeks a year.
2 weeks, 2 weeks a year, I think it is. So, I haven't really had too much.
And they're still under the Department of Transportation?
No, Department of Homeland Security.
Oh, it's under Homeland, okay.
Yes. Back in 2001 is when we made that transfer.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the ratio of men to women?
It's growing in terms of more women in the service. As far as what the ratio is, I can't exactly tell you. But there, in the past, there's been efforts to increase female recruits as well and bring them in.
Do you get women in your courses?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We actually have female coming through for this upcoming surf class. She's from Golden Gate, San Francisco. So, yeah, we have a number of them. There is a surfman. She's a commanding officer of Station Golden Gate, actually. So, yeah, she's pretty much the poster child for that, which it's great. So it's we encourage it obviously, and we look forward to bringing in more. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm very much into hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm getting kind of different levels and some definitions of those.
Mm-hmm.
But who's at the very top? And what happens at your station when you're out on the water? How do those things function?
So basically, all your units, you have, shore side when it comes to operating just the station in general. You have, so in our situation at the Motor Lifeboat School, we have a warrant officer. He's our commanding officer. Our executive petty officer, he is a senior chief, so that's an E8. And then below him, you have the E7s that are in charge of various departments. I'm in charge of the inspector's department, We have a machinery tech chief. Of course, he's in charge of the maintenance department and such. So that's how our hierarchy works. Once you're out on the water, things kind of change just a little bit. Not saying that the commanding officer doesn't have any authority to delegate whatever you're doing on the water, but he's mainly there, for guidance. So it's that person, whoever is driving the boat. They're the ones, whoever's in charge of the boat. That's how that hierarchy works. So when we're on the boat, it's if you're the one, the coxswain in charge, you're pretty much the delegating authority on that boat, followed by your engineer and then your crewman. So it's more of like a functional leadership role when you're out on the water. Does that kind of answer your question?
And then how do you fit within the Coast Guard as a whole?
So I'm an E7 chief of the Coast Guard. So basically a chief's role is to provide, mentorship to subordinates and manage departments. And it also depends on wherever you're at. So smaller units, a chief could be an officer in charge if he's past these, what are called the officer in charge review boards. So if he gets that qualification code, you're eligible. So if I were to pass that board and receive that qualification code, basically I'm putting my name in the hat and I can be in charge of my own unit back east or wherever there's an E7 that's sitting in that position. So in terms of what you're asking, the hierarchy and the levels of rank thereof, it all depends on the dynamics of the unit. And so an E7 in charge of a unit, they typically have like a small amount of people. The larger the amount of people, the higher that the higher in rank that the OIC or your commanding officer is going to be. So at Station Cape Disappointment, the people right next door, they have a lieutenant commander who's in charge. And that's basically because of the amount of people on board, or the amount of people he has to manage on board the unit, as well as the mission itself. So they do port, waterways, and coastal security. So that itself, that's just another mission. And just how it's such a high-profile unit, that's where they want that officer there. So it all depends on the dynamics. Does that kind of answer your question? It's just kind of a broad answer, but it's a very dynamic service. So.
Okay, I'm thinking too of the Admiral of the Navy. Is there a comparable?
Yeah, we have a commandant. So, yeah, we have an admiral, he's our commandant, and then you have various other admirals. They're in charge of districts and areas. So, for example, you have two areas, Atlantic area and Pacific area. So you have admirals in charge of those. So it's commandant, your area commanders, and then you have districts. So admirals are in charge of those as well. And then from there, it divvies out a little bit more. Yes?
Do you get a choice if you, I've noticed that you already said it, but the person in charge down at KD, they change every 4 or every few years. Do they get a choice of where they're going to go? Or if you wanted to move, would you get a choice?
Yeah, so every year, probably the year before you're due to transfer out, you submit what's called an e-resume. So basically it's an electronic resume listing all your qualifications that you have, and then you already have an idea of who's transferring, so what's going to open up. So you get basically a list of picks, and you can see what's available, and you just, in your ranking order, where you want to go. So it all depends on the needs of the service. So you might end up with your last pick, or maybe it wasn't any of your picks at all, but it all depends. For your chiefs and XPOs, those are typically 3-year tours, and it's such a small service on this side as far as like surfmen and small boat stations. That everybody knows everybody, so everybody's IMing each other, calling each other up, and oh, you're leaving, so how about let's talk? How do I get to your seat? And that's kind of how it works.
So everybody wants your job now, huh? They know you're leaving in a couple of years.
But nobody wants my job. So yes.
What's your relation with the river pilots? And
We go over there every now and then, so we're kind of going through the process of revamping the 47. just some design features, things, basically they're trying to extend the service life of the 47, because they've already been in service for, nearly 20 years. So we go over there, we talk with them, and try to pull things that we might be able to utilize from their boats and incorporate it into this new design feature. So nothing's really set in stone, but in terms of just general, hey, how you doing? They call us on the radio and, make fun of us or something.
There's no line of commander in between pilots and the Coast Guard.
Not necessarily, no.
Have you ever had to rescue the bar pilots' boat or affect them in any way?
I myself, no, I don't know of any instance that's ever occurred, other than the pilot a few years back that fell between the pilot boat and the deep draft vessel. I don't know who's involved in terms of assisting that situation, but I don't know if the Coast Guard was there or not. But at that point in time, I was either in Brookings or Tillamook Bay, so I don't have much information in regards to it. Anything else?
Where are you going to go?
Where do I want to go?
When you retire.
Oh. I have a 2, a 4, and a 6-year-old, and my wife, she works at OHSU, so she's a full-time nurse there, so life is really hectic.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a stay-at-home dad for a little while. Take care of the house and stuff. So.
In Portland? You gonna go to Portland?
Camas.
Okay.
Yeah. So we just bought a house up there, so 5 acres, it's nice and quiet. Not in Portland anymore, I hated it there. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. We're from there, from Vancouver, Kansas.
Yeah, I love it there, it's nice. Yes?
So going back to the incident we were describing of the rollover, did you say that was 360?
360.
All the way around?
All the way around.
So, at what point, the boat is going to self-right back up vertical if it doesn't roll too far. At what point does it reach that point where it goes on around?
If the force of the wave, so if you surpass that 110 degrees that I was talking about, 110 degrees is almost like hitting a brick wall. The design features should rewrite the boat. But if you had enough force that has pushed you past that 110 degrees, you're probably going to keep going.
So
at least to 180 and back up.
That was the case in this instance?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the wave basically just grabbed us and took us for a spin. Yeah. It was interesting.
How
was
was
it? Bucket list.
It wasn't on mine, but I can check it out.
what do you have in it to extra weight on the keel to right you?
It's not a whole lot of extra weight. You're not going to see bricks or anything else that's in the boat, in the keel. What you see in the keel basically is we have battery banks in one of the compartments. We have our transmission, the reduction gears. Those are in the compartment aft, so those are pretty heavy as well. And then you have the engines. So all that's just additional weight, pretty much sitting right on either side of the keel. So you figure all that weight, once it's up here, it's going to gravity's going to want to drag it back down. And then you also have buoyant compartments. So the mast platform that has the radar on it, that's just a watertight compartment. So that's just another buoyant compartment that's going to assist in getting that weight back up right where it's supposed to be. So. Yes?
What's the horsepower?
Each engine, so we have 2 Detroit diesels, they're straight 6, and it's 435 horsepower apiece. Yes?
I think I heard you said that when you rescued, you could put 30...
About 34 people.
34 people. But now, do they have lines to be lashed in, or
typically,
how do you keep them in the boat while they're getting out?
If the conditions are such where you want them to be secured, we can put them down inside the boat. It's called the survivor's compartment. But obviously you can't fit 34 people down there. We used to go help the Air Force in their SEER training out of Tillamook Bay. We take them out and drop them off in the middle of the ocean, and then they float out there for probably about 8 hours. Yeah. And so when we brought them back, of course, now we're cramming a bunch of Air Force people inside this boat. So we have the forward compartment, which is pretty much just a buoyant area full of nothing except for some stowage compartments. You can cram them in there, you can put them in the survivor's compartment. You can put them up on the bridge with you. We also have an enclosed steering station with 2 seats and 2 crewman seats, so 4 total. They can sit in there as well. But if you have just drenched personnel, you're flooding the boat. We have like a foot of water in the boat from having that many people in there. Yeah. Along with vomit, because they're not very good. They're not seaworthy people. The air is fine. So, anything else? Well, I have a couple videos. If you guys are interested, I don't know if you guys want to gather around and take a look. I got some footage of just what we kind of encounter out there in general during some of these classes. So, if you guys are interested, I can bring them up.
Yes.
Let's see here. So I apologize for such a small screen. Should have got my wife a larger Mac.
Have you posted those on YouTube?
No, I haven't. But you guys can see right here, if you guys want to gather around, the sound quality of that camera was like. But in this video right here, I am instructing right here, but I'm a student from Morro Bay, California. And so you can see we're conducting a lateral through the surf zone. So we're being to the seas at this point. You can see my hand, I'm telling them to turn, pointing at waves out. Now I see something, I tell them to square up to it, to keep turning.
I'm glad somebody can do that for a living.
Yeah. Now here's this wave that we're trying to deal with because it started to break.
Oh my gosh.
Cool. And then you can see his hand, he got really excited because there's a rainbow. So, don't worry about the rainbow, let's get going. Yeah.
He's looking for a stress card.
It's like, what? There's a rainbow. I was like, don't worry about that thing, let's get going.
Was that cake too?
Yeah, that was the last one. Let's see here. Now this one here is something that didn't go so well, but nobody got hurt and not much damage was done. So this was off of Benson Beach, if you guys are familiar with it. So that's a bit tougher of a zone to work. But what happened was he saw a wave and he started to kind of stair-step his way out into larger and larger breaks, and he lost a lot of his momentum. So when you lose that momentum, your maneuverability to turn on the dime and get squared up to something that's going to hurt you becomes increasingly difficult. Let's see here. So it's about to come. He's trying to outrun it. He's finding himself kind of stair-stepping his way out, and he's kind of found himself in a pinch. And I believe it's on this next wave. Sees something he doesn't like, and he can't get around. Bam! So that laid him out about 90 degrees. Yeah. Yes.
You said that you squared up to the wave, so I guess you're gonna hit the wave head on.
Yes.
But yeah, we were in a thing here a few weeks ago on safety crossing the bar, and they said you should kind of maybe hit it, not at a full quarter, but certainly at a bit of an angle.
That depends. So you're talking about a swell.
Okay.
The swell is not going to do that.
Okay.
A breaking wave, it shouldn't be there in the first place. You don't have our boats, don't go there. I don't even want to go there some days. Let's see, you're bad anymore. But for waves that are actually breaking, yeah, you want to be pointed directly at them.
So did that guy do everything right and it just turned out?
Basically what he should have done earlier on, because you could see where he lost a lot of his momentum, he kept doing this. He should have just stopped on the first one and just let that series go through and then continue to go. But you kind of find yourselves, the idea, you get locked into teaching somebody, like you try to get from point A to point B as fast as you can and as safe as you can. Well, and reverse that order. As safe as you can and as fast as you can. It ended up not being as safe, so, but it happens. So this was something out on Clatsop Spit. And I'm the one driving on this one, so you can't really see me, but basically when we start an evolution, we do a demo first, and then we follow it up with students on the wheel. So I'm just kind of sitting here waiting for a lull to come through, but as you're sitting there, you got to deal with these brakes. So I think this one here, I backed down to let it brake in front of me, and then I punched through it.
You're always wet.
Yeah, you're wet all the time. But that's pretty much it in general. So if you guys have any more questions?
That's great, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I would like to ask one more thing.
Sure.
I can sit down for a little bit. We've kind of termed this whole series, this fall series, as to celebrate the river. And I know so many of us talk about having been away, and you come to an Astoria and you get across that bridge and you have this sense of, yes, there's just something so dramatic and significant in our lives that the river has become. So can you just kind of take a minute and tell us, is this body of water, speaking of the river now, as magnificent as we view it? Or how does it place magnificently that we have right to celebrate it in our life?
Well, if you figure, for thousands of years probably. All your cultures, Indians, everybody's just made a living off of this river. It's provided so much, substance for people, provided a living, so food, shelter, everything. Jobs now, as everything becomes more modern, because there's countless dams all the way up here. So, and not to mention just commerce in general, and just how they keep it dredged to keep commerce going. And you don't even realize just how much that you depend on this whole river until with this Eagle Creek fire right across the way from the Bonneville Dam and everything. So the Coast Guard shut that whole portion of the river down. So you got to figure that's millions upon millions of dollars every day that the economy's losing because of some kid with a 14-year-old kid with a firecracker. So just what this river provided then and continues to provide every day, that's truly magnificent, and just how reliantly it came to depend on this thing. That, and plus just its natural beauty, and even more so, it's just the potential power that you guys even see right there. So it's just the amount of respect that the river alone commands, even on a flat, calm day. Because you have to figure if the tide turns and starts to flow out, and you had maybe an 8-foot swell, which someone said you can quarterly swells and everything. Well, that swell, if you don't have the respect for it or the knowledge to deal with it, that swell is now turned into a 12 or 14-foot break, and it can really, it could put a damper on your day. So just the amount of respect, and then again going back to the beauty, it's something to be really admired. So.
I think he hit it on the head.
Thank you for your service to our country.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And of course, 2 weeks from now, we'll continue with this celebration of that wonderful body of water. And thank you. You just culminated it.
Well, good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.